Hello, everyone. I'm so excited for this conversation today. So, I'm Deborah Boggs, CEO of DNS Executive Career Management. We work with senior leaders, typically VP, C level, and board level leaders, to help them position and navigate to land that next big thing. So, whether that's the next career role, a board seat, whatever that may be, we work on the candidate side to help them navigate that process. So if you have any questions about working with us, things like that, I know Carmen Poff will pop her information in the chat. Carmen is our Director of Client Success. But today we have a very special guest, and I know one that people have been really, really excited to talk to. So I'm so excited to introduce Amber Schleinkofer. She is an executive recruiter with AS Talent Advisors, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she does and, really importantly, how it's changing for the hiring landscape, how you can navigate this process, things like this. So before I hand it over to her, I'd love to know where you all are joining us from. We love to see who's out there, so pop it in the chat, where you're joining us from, who's out there, that way we can see you all. And also, if you have any questions for Amber as we go through this process, we'll do our best to take questions live as we can. So please feel free to hop in the chat. So Amber, take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
First, thanks so much for having me. I'm just thrilled to have an opportunity to connect and share and hopefully answer some questions here. A little background: been in recruiting since 1998. It's been a little while.
Yes.
In many industries, through those years, and at a lot of different levels. Started AS Talent Advisors almost 2 years ago now. We focus on direct hire placement, but also recruitment consulting for our clients. Primarily focus in manufacturing and construction, but do serve outside of that as well. So been doing this a little while, seen some neat things in the industry, and like I said, looking forward to sharing today. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And, you bring up a really great point when you said you've been doing this since 1998. One of the things I love about this industry is that because the job market changes all the time, our work changes all the time. We're not recruiters. We don't do placements, but we do help people navigate the process. And I would say every 6 months, that's a new process. And in these last 2 years, it's changed drastically. Excuse me. So I'd love to know from you, what have you seen? What is different right now in the hiring landscape than it was maybe 2 years ago when people maybe last searched for a role? And while you do that, if anyone wants to pop in the chat where you're joining us from, I see Carmen Poff is here in Portland, Maine, Blessing in Nigeria. Great to see you all. A Blessing side quest, real quick, is our executive assistant and just had a baby. So we're going to publicly yell at her for even being on this call, but congratulations, Blessing. So tell us a little bit, what's going on these last 2 years?
Yeah, a lot. I think if you really kind of backtrack to 2 years ago, we all want to look ahead and plan, and that's, human nature. 2 years ago, I think we thought there'd be a lot more hiring at the executive level. But economically, things have shifted, and really seen companies thinking a little harder, longer before replacing roles. A couple of years ago, we were really concerned about a lot of boomers retiring and needing to backfill those positions. And the positive was a lot of companies started doing good work on making sure that they had those transition plans in place. But as we have seen folks retire, and maybe they didn't have that backfill ready, a lot of companies are taking that role and really kind of splitting things over a couple of people before that next hire, and looking to see how the organization can manage with those duties being shifted versus a role being filled. So it's created, unfortunately, for those who are actively looking, I think a little lower supply of opportunities hitting the market. Another kind of constraint there has been many who had planned to retire. We're seeing that slowing down. Someone who thought maybe they were going to retire in 24, they're still around, or they, instead of retiring, are hanging in there fractionally. So I think that's been one area that 2 years ago, I wouldn't have thought sitting here the market was going to look the way it did. And then
Yeah.
the other, and I know no one wants to keep hearing about this, but is, the tech that is now being used to screen. And the tech is clunky. It's just not it. There's going to be ways that AI can really be beneficial in the future, but those models they're still training. And so you have to recognize that in a search. So I think those are probably the two biggest things that we're seeing and talking about on a regular basis right now.
Yeah, and there's such good points. It's what we're seeing in the market too, is the slowdown to hire, right? This process takes, and I'd love to get your perspective. What we're seeing is that companies, if they are hiring, if you need a general manager or a CEO, you need that person, but they're being really slow to make those strategic hire decisions from our perspective. And then the length of time to hire has really increased in terms of decision-making, rounds of interviews, things like that. So I'd love to know what you see from your end, and if that, what people can expect in terms of timelines and just what that process looks like right now.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. The hiring timelines at that level they've slowed down. It's not uncommon to have a pause. You start to move in a direction, and then there's something that happens within the business climate, economically, staff structure.
Yeah.
You get a pause in there. Sometimes you're bringing in a board member in those types of organizations that can come and step in for a period of time.
Yes.
And then a relaunch. And so that's happening quite often. It's almost becoming, I'm finding myself coaching my hiring teams that it's almost become normal going into that process.
Right.
So that when those pieces, or when that starts to happen, that normalization allows them to be more comfortable with it, because then they're communicating more quickly with not just me, but the candidate pool.
Yes, because when it goes on for this long, it can be really hard. I'd love to, a couple of things you said, I think, I want to push on. And one of those is that it's not uncommon to pause right now.
Sure.
One of those things we see is if someone hasn't done a job search either ever at this level, which is typically our candidates or people that have built amazing careers through their network, getting promoted, getting recruited, they've never had to go at this level, or they haven't had to do it in a couple of years. And they'll say to us things like, well, I've got a couple of irons in the fire that look really good, so I'm going to pursue these before I need any support with my search. Or, I think I'm about to get an offer because I've had a couple of calls with this company or whatever. It's a long process, and it's not uncommon for there to be a pause, a change in direction. I mean, if a process goes months long in this business climate, that's years, right? In terms of strategy and what's going on, and, planning and all of these things. And so, having as many irons in the fire and not just waiting on that one opportunity that looks good is really helpful from the candidate perspective, because otherwise we've seen things fall apart at every stage.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. At the point where we're jumping in at that level, I would say, prepare for maybe, 6 months for a search.
Wow.
And so unless, there's some reason that's an urgent fill. But 6 months at the executive level is not uncommon. And if you are actively, if you're working,
right,
and you have an iron in the fire, you think there's an offer pending, but you also want to transition out, you can't rely on one thing. You need to be diversified if you have a timeline that you're trying to honor for transitioning out of an organization. You really need to have a couple of irons in the fire.
You do. I'm so glad you brought this up, that it can take 6 months, because sometimes when we say this to people, I don't think they believe us, right? From our perspective, it's, oh, you're trying to sell me support. And it's just really more of a market reality check of what's going on right now in a really tough market, as far as the hiring, the pace to hire is really slowed down. So I'm going to pause real quick and tell everyone who's maybe just joining us, thanks for joining us. I see someone here from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thanks for popping in. If you want to pop in the chat where you're joining us from, and also if you have any questions for Amber, She is an executive recruiter, and so if anyone has any questions on, how to interface with recruiters as a candidate, what they're looking for, how to stand out, we'll be digging into some of these things together. But if you have any specific questions, please feel free. And one quick thing, if you're in a search and it's been taking a while, or you're getting ready to go into a search and want to make sure that you have everything you need to really hit the ground running, we have an executive job search readiness assessment. It's a free tool. It's a self-assessment to go through and see, based on the 7 aspects of an effective executive search, in terms of having a focus, having a great resume, your LinkedIn profile is optimized. I know Amber's going to talk a little bit about that, but then also your interview readiness, your job search strategy, and then your compensation negotiation. All of those things are in this. So I'll leave this up for just a second while I tee Amber up to talk about, as you're evaluating candidates today, I'd love to know what companies are looking for. Do you find that their expectations are getting more specific? Is there any specific skills people are looking for right now? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it really is specific to the organization and where they're headed. We have a lot of conversations that involve the theme of reverse engineering here, whether we're talking with someone who is considering a change, or whether we are working with a company that's getting ready to make a hire. Oftentimes you look at the last time you made that hire, what you hired for, and it just seems logical or feels right to look for the same thing again. And when a company starts their process that way, we find that they haven't thought about really where they're headed, where that growth is. And so again, it's that what are the next couple of chapters and where's the gap? And let's reverse engineer the skill set needed. So that's really
so important.
What we, are typically talking about. But really, seeing a lot, around values alignment.
I've heard that from a couple of people too, making sure it's that right fit.
With the market being tighter, industry alignment is typically pretty important because of the ramp up, especially at the executive level, right? Everybody talks about bringing somebody in that can be plug and play. No one is plug and play. They still have to learn you. They have to learn, they have to understand where you're headed. What is the goal? What is expected of them, and what do they need to do? And where they, when you start a new role, you want to make sure that you're able to bring value. That's what feels good. That's why we do what we do. And so, it's a lot of that, and then working backwards.
That makes so much sense. And I think, that's so important from a candidate standpoint too, of thinking, where do you want to go, and not necessarily what have you always ever done, but what does that next role need to look like? And so I know offline, you had some really great insight on how to optimize your profile and just how to stand out in this market. And so I'd love for you to dig into that a little bit, because I think there was some really interesting advice you had on just making sure that you are findable. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, love to. I think whether it is your, however you're going to be found professionally, that piece, whether it's a resume, your LinkedIn profile, even a bio that's floating around online, right? That information needs to be optimized for not just what you've accomplished. Your accomplishments are so important.
Right.
It also needs to be presented in a way, almost marketed in a way, right? For what you want to do next. And so oftentimes I'm having conversations with individuals, and whether it's someone early, mid, or, late career, about kind of envision today, if you thought about where you want to retire, it's 4:00 on your last day, tomorrow's first day of retirement, you're getting ready to shut the light off of your office. Where are you? What does that look like? What have you accomplished? And then let's work backwards. What are you doing today that is building out the path to get you there? Now, completely realize that the path is never linear. I shouldn't
Right.
say never, but unlikely to really,
Rarely linear today.
right. But, life happens, things change, but let's keep you on that path of where you're trying to get to. So when you are building out, let's pick on a LinkedIn profile. It's one of those things that all of us here have in common, right? So, looking at the pieces of your LinkedIn profile and making sure that they are presented, marketed, and even keyword optimized in a way that
Yes.
you are findable, one, and that you're findable for the right opportunities.
Yes.
I'm a recruiter. Do I reach out to individuals that are not interested in things that I'm reaching out to them for? It happens every day.
Right.
It would be easier for me to find you for the right opportunity if the information you're sharing is up to date and it's presented
Yes.
in a way that's going to map to that, right? And so, everything from that headline section underneath your name, making sure that is marketed in a way that is kind of what you are doing, what you can do, but also what you want to do. It's short.
Yes.
You got to keep it short, but think about that. Your about section, the same thing. It's a great place to optimize some keywords for findability. You can really kind of walk through it that way.
Yeah. Such important information, especially from your perspective as a recruiter. And it also comes up, just this morning, I know you and I talked offline. I was speaking on a panel live here in Boston, which is why my lighting and background is terrible. I'm in a hotel room. But I was speaking to a group of CFOs about their pathway to the boardroom. And someone asked, how important is LinkedIn for this process? You've got the board resume, you've got the board bio. And one of my fellow panelists, who sits on a couple of public company boards, said, LinkedIn is important, but it also has to say what you want to do and not just what you're doing right now. So if you don't have a board seat, I'm not going to reach out to you about board opportunities or think of you for board opportunities if you don't list that somewhere, or, that you're, have capacity for a board or whatever it is you want to be found for. It can't just be a list of everything you've ever done, like a historical document. So I think that's interesting that it's come up twice today, because it is so important that you're writing for the future and not necessarily just a laundry list of your accomplishments.
Yeah. Well, we see a lot of times, and whether, kind of on that board seat or professional role,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times a LinkedIn profile is kind of at a minimum,
Right.
and not really built out. And so even I think areas that can be kind of missed are your skills and interest. They're all the way at the bottom. Who needs
Yeah.
those, right? But that is an area that I think, kind of thinking along those lines of not just your next professional role, but also a board seat are areas that could be better optimized. And, better considered. If you have interests listed that, are not aligned with the board seat that you're seeking, that's going to be pretty obvious there.
Right.
So that might be an area to really kind of think about. And then on the flip side of that, if you do have interests where you are maybe serving on a board now that serves focused on maybe I'm trying to think of an area, literacy, right?
Oh, yeah.
So maybe it's an area of literacy or financial literacy. I would highlight those things, especially as a CFO, right? In the financial literacy side of things, that would be a very logical area somebody's looking to tap in for them. Also too, I think, making sure your skills that you've listed that you've worked for, maybe a public, you've done public accounting.
Right.
That could be important from a board governance or a next role standpoint, or even that you've done mergers and acquisitions, or there's so many things there that are an easy opportunity just to go in and build that out. They're going to make you more findable.
Right. Yeah. So you've got to add information. So many people say like, oh, well, people at my level, I've looked at my peers and they don't have anything listed. So I don't want to list anything because I don't want to list too much because so-and-so over here doesn't have anything. Well, so-and-so over there may not be in an active search. They may not need to be found. Everyone uses LinkedIn for different reasons. And so you can't lean on what other people have if it's minimal and say, well, I shouldn't include information either. There's a question in the chat. Lois asks, do you recruit for board positions? Do you ever fill board seats in the work that you do?
We don't. Yeah, that's just not an area that, yeah, that
It's
we,
pretty niche.
it is.
So,
Yeah.
and I told you I wasn't going to throw any curveballs, and I lied apparently. But if anyone has any questions on the process and how to stand out to recruiters, things like that, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And we have some people. Let's see, Virginia, Texas, Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, lots of warm places. I'm very jealous. Up here in New England right this second. So let's talk about. I know you alluded to it earlier. The role of tech in the hiring process right now, in the screening process. I know you said no one wants to talk about it, and I agree, because it's it's a hot button issue. But let's talk about what you're seeing right now in the market, and how people can either interact with or circumvent some of these tools that feel like maybe they're a little clunky.
Sure. Yeah. We're seeing the use of AI and different mapping algorithms
Mm-hmm.
at different levels with all the organizations. Some are using them more, some not at all. Some started, pulled back, but I don't think they're going anywhere. I think we're just going to see them used more as they're able to be better, as they're stronger, right?
Right.
I think in today's world, when I'm working with people who are either passive or actively looking, an easy way to be found is, and a good example of this is kind of in that skills section on a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And that really it's no different than keyword optimization on a resume.
Yeah.
But for example, let's say that ABC company posts that they need to hire a CFO today, and they push that out on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a place where that HR team, that hiring team, will need to map a couple of core competencies that allows the LinkedIn algorithm to match candidates for them.
Okay.
So if you wanted to be found, for example, for that role, a couple of things that you would want to consider when, building out your LinkedIn profile or updating your LinkedIn profile would be that skills section, looking at what you have listed, and thinking not only high level. We mentioned CFOs, so let's just continue to pick on that group. But
somebody said it in this morning, so.
Yeah. So, FP&A, your financial planning analysis, that might be an area that you pick that's going to be high level. Again, that public accounting. Beyond that, I would look at what tech, dig in a little bit. What tech do you use specific to your financial work in your industry? So, we mentioned that I, do work in one of the industries is manufacturing. Well, an MRP system is going to be important. So if a company is using SAP or getting ready to do an SAP launch, having a CFO that's familiar with SAP would be important. That's what the recruiter's going to look at and say, okay, how can I find somebody who has that background, or what companies do I know use SAP, and go backwards? Well, make it easy for them. One, you can list it in your, let's say the company you're working with did an SAP integration or implementation. You can list that in your work history, but you can also list that as a skill in the technology piece of LinkedIn. That's going to be a way that you're more findable, again, for an opportunity that's going to align, but also an opportunity that's going to value the experience that you can bring because you've done an SAP implementation. That's scary to them. That's new. That is where you're going to bring strength and value. So think about things in that way when you're kind of working through building out, again, that resume or what have you, licenses and certifications. You can put something there, build out your about, like I said, your about section with some of that information too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Adding those things that make you different and unique, and not just, you're maybe, I've been a CFO here. I can be a CFO anywhere. Well, where can you really drive that value? And pulling those skills makes so much sense. Right. So Deborah asks, how many skills should you have in your profile? I know you can list maybe 50, it at least used to be. What do you suggest? How many skills should people be adding?
Minimum of 20, but
Mm,
if they're relevant, yeah, you can add beyond that, up to that 50. If
okay.
someone is active, the folks that I've been working with that are active and that search is taking longer and we're digging in on how to make them the absolute most findable.
Yeah.
I'm getting in there with them on and pulling up their LinkedIn profile, and we are getting those things added
Oh,
up
I
to,
love
up to
that.
that 50 number. Yeah.
That's great advice because that definitely goes deeper than just the optimization of all the other areas like your headline and your about section, but then adding those cues. Now, I'm pulling up a question that Richard Harper is asking, and I will give you a chance to answer if you'd like. If not, I'm happy to take it. People contact me about possible jobs, but I need to format my resume for ATS by a resume expert. Is that a legitimate paid service? So it sounds like, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, you're getting contacted by companies with an opportunity, but you can't pursue that opportunity until you've paid to have your resume ATS optimized. Correct me if that's not true. What are your thoughts on that, Amber? Or like I said, happy to take it.
Yeah, there are organizations that do that and do that very well. So yeah, and I believe do you all do resume? You guys do resume writing?
We do. So we do resume writing. I think where the difference, if I'm under, oh, thank you, Hannah. It's up to 100 skills now. Thank you. Hannah's a fellow career industry leader and has obviously done this more recently than I have. So Richard, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, if you get a cold reach out by a company and then they say, we want you for this opportunity, but you have to go through this specific vendor to have your resume optimized for our system, that is something we see a lot as not a legitimate service. They're really just trying to sell you ATS optimization.
Yes.
If you're working with,
Mhm.
yeah. So, but if you're working with a recruiter who says, hey, you may not be showing up as strong as you'd like to be, you could, and I know, and a lot of recruiters will send people to people like us that say they need some polish, they need to show up stronger at the executive level, things like that. But it's not a barrier to entry and it's not a cold reach out or a hard sell. So I think if anyone is requiring money from you for that, that's not a legitimate service. I mean, it's maybe a legitimate service, but it's not something you should pay for.
Yeah, I would do your due diligence and look for somebody within your industry. And oftentimes reaching out to a recruiter or two within your industry, they're going to be able to get you to someone within the industry that can help you with that rewriting your resume to make sure it is, ATS compliant.
Absolutely. Like when we do work with our candidates, we do ATS compliant resumes and and they also look nice and all of that, but it's not something that no recruiter should probably be telling you have to have this to be interested in this particular opportunity. So thanks for that question. Couple of other thoughts. You touched on how long the search is taking right now. I know we only have a couple minutes left. What advice would you give to someone who's maybe been in the search for 6+ months and are getting frustrated with the process? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, give yourself a little grace.
Mm,
It is.
yeah.
It's just a tough market right now, unfortunately. In being in a career search at any point, it's I think we overlook just how difficult that
Mm,
process really can be in general. So give yourself grace. Talk with someone about your process, how you're approaching your process. Again, that's where engaging, just talking with a recruiter in your industry a little bit about what they're seeing. They may be able to provide some help there because maybe it's something to do more with your process. Ask them to peek at your resume. Maybe there
yeah.
is a glaring reason there that things aren't happening. But be open to feedback, but seek out that feedback, and take that advice to heart, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think this is excellent. I think your advice on checking into the process, because so many people are like, oh, the market is awful, I'll never get a job. Well, there are things you can do to make it easier on yourself or remove some roadblocks. And I know we said earlier in the call, but I'm going to pull it up just in case, is if you are in that search and you've been in it for a while and you're not sure maybe where the roadblocks are happening, this is a free tool, self-assessment to really understand what areas you're doing well and what areas may be holding you back or costing you offers or costing those recruiter reach outs that you can optimize and hopefully get some more irons in the fire. Because you had said earlier, just so true, we want to make sure that we're not focused on one opportunity. We're getting as many irons in the fire because this process is long and every individual process could take 6 months. So we want to make sure we're hitting our search from all angles. So I'll take this back down, and I cannot thank you enough for sharing your wisdom with us. This was an incredible conversation, and I know I got a lot out of it, and I really appreciate you taking the time with us all. We will pop Amber's link in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to her, learn more about her work. Certainly, if you own a business or are recruiting for any executive roles, reach out to Amber. She's an excellent resource.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk with you all today.
Yeah, you too. Thanks so much, Amber. I appreciate you.
Take care.